Hi, I'm John Stevenson. We're going to be looking at David, the betrayed deliverer, 1 Samuel chapter 23. Chapter 23, verse 1, Then they told David, saying, Behold, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah and are plundering the threshing floors. Now, Keilah is one of those Israelite cities in the Shephelah, that is the foothills, the place between the lowlands where Ekron and Gath and the Philistines live, and the highlands, that is the mountains to the east. Um, and the fact that the Philistines are plundering the threshing floors. Threshing floor is where you would keep all the grain that had been ground. It's up in a high place, might have a storage container or something there. And the Philistines were coming and stealing the grain that belongs to the Israelites, which means the Israelites are they're going to be going hungry. They're going to be starving because the Philistines are taking all of their food. Verse 2, So David inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall I go and attack these Philistines? And the Lord said to David, Go and attack the Philistines and deliver Keilah. Verse 3, But David's men said to him, Behold, we are afraid here in Judah. How much more then if we go to Keilah against the ranks of the Philistines? We've been running from Saul back and forth, and first down to Azekah, and then over to Moab, and then back and forth. And now we're going to go fight the most heavily armed people in the entire Middle East. We're going to go fight the Philistines. Verse 4, Then David inquired of the Lord once more. He wants a double check, and the Lord answered him and said, Arise, go down to Keilah, for I will give the Philistines into your hand. Verse 5, So David and his men went down to Keilah and fought with the Philistines, and he led away their livestock and struck them with a great slaughter. Thus David delivered the inhabitants of Keilah. So David goes down, he defends these Israelites against the Philistines, and he is their deliverer. Verse 6, Now it came about when Abiathar, remember this is the surviving son of the high priest, so he's now becoming the new high priest. Abiathar, the son of Ahimelech, fled to David at Keilah, that he came down with an ephod in his hand. An ephod it looks a little bit like an apron. It's an outer thing that goes over your outerwear. And the ephod would have the breastplate attached to it of the high priest, and inside would be these two devices, the Urim and the Thummim. The Urim, is a word for light, and so these are the lights, plural, and the Thummim, the perfections. And they were some sort of devices. I don't know if they were like, it's like flipping a coin or rolling dice or something, that will help you to determine what is the will of God. The Proverbs say the lot is cast into the lap, but it's every sign is from the Lord. And so this was used by God to let people know what his will was. And so he's got this ephod. Now that word ephod, the translators weren't sure what to do with it, so they just gave you the Hebrew word ephod. It's the same in Hebrew as in English. They put just English letters on it for the translation. And it's this device. Verse 7, When it was told Saul that David had come to Keilah, Saul said, God has delivered him into my hand, for he shut himself in by entering a city with double gates and bars. You see, when you had a large city, it would have a double fortification, like you see in the picture here, where there'd be a gate and then the gate structure, and then another gate. So you have a gate in the foreground and a gate in the background, and then the city beyond. Now, it doesn't mean that there's two different ways into the city. There's only one way in, but you have to go through this double gate to get there. And David has entered that kind of city, which means there's only one way in and there's one way out. Verse 8, So Saul summoned all the people for war to go down to Keilah to besiege David and his men. Saul is coming for David. Verse 9, Now David knew that Saul was plotting evil against him, so he said to Abiathar the priest, Bring the ephod here. Verse 10, Then David said, O Lord God of Israel, your servant has heard for certain that Saul is seeking to come to Keilah to destroy the city on my account. Will the men of Keilah surrender me into his hand? Will Saul come down just as your servant has heard? O Lord God of Israel, I pray tell your servant. And the Lord said, He will come down. Verse 12, Then David said, Will the men of Keilah surrender me and my men into the hand of Saul? And the Lord said, Yes, they will surrender you. There's no loyalty there to be had. Verse 13, then David and his men, about 600, notice its increase in size since we saw it last, about 600 arose and departed from Keilah, and they went wherever they could go. In other words, they sort of scattered in all directions, and when it was told Saul that David escaped from Keilah, he gave up the pursuit. So verse 14, David stayed in the wilderness in the strongholds, and remained in the hill country in the wilderness of Ziph, and Saul sought him every day, but God did not deliver him into his hand. So he leaves Keilah, he goes up into the mountains now, the area around the town of Ziph, and he is still hiding from Saul, and he has escaped from Saul. Verse 15, now David became aware that Saul had come out to seek his life while David was in the wilderness of Ziph at Horesh. Verse 16, and Jonathan, Saul's son, arose and went to David at Horesh and encouraged him in God. So notice everything has been Saul against David, but now we have an interlude with Jonathan. Verse 17, thus he said to him, do not be afraid, because the hand of Saul my father will not find you, and you will be king over Israel, and I will be next to you, and Saul my father knows that also. Everyone knows that you're going to be the next king. Don't sweat it. Just sort of hang out, stay out of Saul's clutches, and things will work out for you. Notice Jonathan is giving something like a prophecy. Now, I don't know if it's God-inspired prophecy, but he can see what we would call the handwriting on the wall. Verse 18, so the two of them made a covenant before the Lord, and David stayed at Horesh while Jonathan went to his house. And so now they part company for the final time. Verse 19, then Ziphites came up to Saul at Gibeah. Apparently Saul's gone back to Gibeah, his hometown, saying, is David not hiding with us in the strongholds at Horesh on the hill of Achilah, which is on the south of Jeshimon? David is there. They are sort of turning him in. They're telling on David. Verse 20, now then, O king, they say to Saul, come down according to all the desire of your soul to do so, and our part shall be to surrender him into the king's hand. We have here a betrayal. Saul's answer, verse 21, Saul said, may you be blessed of the Lord, for you have had compassion on me. Go now, make more sure, and investigate and see his place where his haunt is, and who has seen him there, for I am told that he is very cunning. We've already seen an example of that in the last two chapters. Verse 23, so look and learn about all the hiding places where he hides himself, and return to me with certainty, and I will go with you, and if he is in the land, I will search him out among all the thousands of Judah. Verse 24, then they arose and went to Ziph before Saul. Now David and his men were in the wilderness of Maon, and the Arabah to the south of Jeshimon. They're in that area where you're getting to, the wilderness area. Arabah actually comes to mean south, but it has that idea of the wilderness area. Verse 25, then Saul and his men went to seek him, and they told David, and he came down to the rock and stayed in the wilderness of Maon. And when Saul heard it, he pursued David in the wilderness of Maon. So he's hot on his trail. He's about to catch up with him. Verse 26, Saul went on one side of the mountain, David and his men on the other side of the mountain, and David was hurrying to get away from Saul. You can see the suspense building up, for Saul and his men were surrounding David and his men to seize them, and he's about to catch up with him. Verse 27, but a messenger came to Saul saying, hurry and come, for the Philistines have made a raid on the land. Where'd that come from? Well, I think it came from God. The Philistines are doing it for their own purpose. And so verse 28, so Saul returned from pursuing David and went to meet the Philistines. Therefore, they called that place the Rock of Escape. Did you hear that? The Rock of Escape, where God had designed it, whereas they're just at the right place, they're about to be captured, and all of a sudden he works out the situation where Saul is taken away, and they give this the place name, the Rock of Escape, which reminds us of another rock of escape, a place where God took what looked like certain defeat and changed it into victory, and it has become our rock of escape, where we have escaped the very judgment of God. Well, verse 29 sums up now. David went up from there and stayed in the strongholds of En-Gedi, that's down by the Dead Sea, and we'll pick up next time there at En-Gedi.